Hi, everyone. It is noon here in New York. I'm Alicia Menendez. Welcome to On the Line. Have Kash Patel's antics finally caught up with him? President Trump's FBI director is facing new congressional investigations, not just into allegations of lavish spending on the job, but also into his surge of FBI resources to reinvestigate the 2020 election. First, on the spending. Democrats now getting some GOP backup in their probes of what they've dubbed Patel's jet setting. MS Now has viewed a letter from Republican Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley demanding Patel turn over information about the Bureau's purchase of BMWs instead of the standard Chevy SUVs, and whether he's reimbursed the FBI for personal travel on FBI aircraft. And if anyone should know about the pitfalls of an FBI director using a government plane for his own benefit, it's Kash Patel.
Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off. Just a thought.
Go take their money. Chris Wray doesn't need a private jet.
We're not the guys running around on private jets. And somebody maybe in Congress should ask for how many flights on a private jet Director Comey took, or my predecessor Director Wray took, and how many personal trips they took.
But the questions Patel is facing go way beyond his travel. Senate Democrats now also demanding answers about why Patel has deployed hundreds of FBI analysts to work on record checks in Georgia related to the 2020 election. They are worried Patel is diverting resources from investigations into things like terrorism and corruption in order to placate Donald Trump, something Senator Mark Warner, the vice chair of the Intel Committee, called negligence and abuse of power of the highest order. Let's bring in MS Now Justice and Intel reporter Ken Delanian, who was busy this morning breaking both of these exclusive stories on Kash Patel. And with me on set, former senior CIA, White House, and State Department official Ned Price, along with MS Now political analyst and Bloomberg opinion executive editor Tim O'Brien. Ken, what a morning. Two big new investigations here. Let's take them one by one. Let's start with the travel. Democrats have wanted answers on this for months. How significant is it that now you have Grassley, who has questions too?
Oh, I think it's deeply significant, Alicia, and particularly because it was notable that Grassley did not make this letter public. So he's trying to thread the needle here. But he has a long history of conducting oversight of the spending of taxpayer money with both parties in power. And he said that in his letter to Kash Patel. He said, it's nothing personal. We just feel like we deserve answers about your use of taxpayer-funded resources, including your use of the FBI jet and your purchase of these BMW SUVs. And by the way, I got a new response from the FBI. They did not respond initially when I queried them yesterday about this reporting, but I just now have a response. And one of the things they told me was that they purchased these BMWs from the State Department. And they were sitting idly in a warehouse. That is new information. That's not what they told us back in December when we first reported on this. But just in general, you have this building sort of momentum of drip, drip, drip stories about Kash Patel and his use of government resources. We hear things all the time from people inside the FBI who are very troubled by it. They just don't think it's a good look. And now you have the senior Republican chairman of the Judiciary Committee asking questions about it. And unlike the Democrats, he has the leverage to get these answers. What he will do with that information remains to be seen. Will he hold a hearing? Will he make it public? But at least he's asking the questions, Alicia.
Ned, I want you to just bring us back here to Earth One. During your time in government, how often were you using government resources for personal use?
I can't recall a time I ever did. Look, but let me be serious here for a second. I don't begrudge this FBI director or any FBI director for flying on an FBI-owned airplane. That's what they have to do. When FBI directors travel domestically or internationally, they have to have secure communications at the ready. They have to be able to get places quickly and efficiently. If Kash Patel had been traveling for purely official business all this time, totally fine. Sure. And of course, an FBI director, just like any other human, is entitled to a vacation every now and then. I wouldn't begrudge that. But when you take a look at the totality of his schedule and the boondoggles that occasionally are interspersed with his official business, or let me flip that, the official business that is occasionally interspersed with the boondoggles, that I do begrudge. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And the fact that Senator Grassley, good for him, is coming onto this suggests this is something that is grabbing even Republican attention.
It's not new, though, right? Like, we have known all of this. So why suddenly is Grassley interested?
That's a great question. You know, why suddenly is the Republican Party developing a spine around conflict of interest issues and corruption in the federal government when it went on in Trump's first term and it's gone on again? I have to sense that some of it is they're smelling it in the water. They're recognizing that everything that's come out.
Is that the reflecting pool water?
Yes, the reflective pond, as the president calls it. I think they're starting to see that voters are paying attention to this, and corruption has not been a thing voters have actually really focused on. But I think the recent revelation of Trump with his crypto billions, there's so much momentum around this, and people in his administration, I don't think would feel that they were flagrantly entitled to make use of government property and taxpayer money to, as Kash Patel did, go to Vegas with his girlfriend for purely entertainment. Or to chug beer with the U.S. hockey team, or on and on. All these different things he did that either were unbecoming of an FBI director or a fairly transparent misuse of government resources. So Trump's opened the door to this by his own behavior. He and his family crossed these lines. And I think the Republican Party now, they've got to be the ones to step up on this in a forceful way so their own constituents see this as a nonpartisan issue and as an issue around corruption that shouldn't be tolerated in either party.
Ken, in their own letter, you had Senate Democrats, Dick Durbin, you had Jamie Raskin in the House saying they appreciate Grassley raising the concerns, note the various other cases of Patel using taxpayer funding for personal use, the helicopter tours, the jet ski excursions. If they do, in fact, have Grassley's backing, what more can they learn?
Oh, well, they can get the records describing all of these trips, because right now we just have to take the FBI's word for it. And for example, in their new response, the FBI is disputing that Kash Patel took any excursions, jet skiing, or helicopter tours. But that's what the Democrats are hearing from whistleblowers. They're hearing that people inside the FBI feel pressured to essentially entertain the director as he jets around the country and around the world and make sure that he's got access to basically personal fun while he's visiting these various offices. And they even say that they were told that he opened an office in Wellington, New Zealand for the FBI for the express purpose of taking a vacation there. Now, again, the FBI is denying that through Patel's spokesperson. They did open an office for the first time in Wellington, New Zealand. But it seems pretty clear that Kash Patel is taking advantage of his official travel. He's been to UFC events. He's been to hockey games. Of course, the famous incident in Milan. He's watched his girlfriend perform. She's a country singer. So that's pretty obvious that that's going on. And yes, he does have to travel on the plane. But what Democrats are saying is you don't have to exploit it to take vacations. Previous directors kept that to a minimum.
All right, Ken, let's move on to investigation number 2. Democrats want to know more about what Patel is up to vis-a-vis his looks at the 2020 election. What do they want to know?
Well, they are, Mark Warner in particular, the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, is absolutely apoplectically outraged about the idea that Kash Patel is requiring FBI intelligence analysts, 260 of them, to spend time doing records checks in this investigation of the 2020 election. His baseline question is, what's the crime here? We don't even know. They haven't told us what is the basis for this investigation. We know that they seized the ballots in Fulton County. We haven't heard really anything since. And now, we first reported that Patel is requiring these analysts to spend all these hours. And one of the things I'm told they may be doing is going through all of those ballots that they seized in search of people who weren't citizens or who somehow voted improperly. And there may be a few of those. That happens in every election. But Joe Biden won the state by nearly 12,000 votes. There's been scores of investigations looking at all the different claims of fraud. None of that has panned out. And yet you have the FBI diverting resources to this. And Mark Warner is asking for information about it. He's not likely to get it. But if the Democrats seize control of the Senate, he will have leverage to get it next year.
I think what is interesting, Ned, is what it is that Senator Warner is highlighting here. Like, there is the danger of this administration setting a predicate for future elections by claiming that there was fraud in past elections. They are clearly continue to be desperate to prove that, despite the fact that they do not have any such proof 6 years later. But there's also the opportunity cost. There's what happens when you take resources that are supposed to be focused on terrorism and instead focus them on an election that happened 6 years ago.
Well, and it's, Alicia, it's not just the FBI, to speak to the point of opportunity cost. Tulsi Gabbard, the former director of national intelligence, she was spotted in Fulton County, Georgia. It wasn't clear what she was doing until she later told the press that President Trump had directed her to go down there. So it's the FBI, it's our director of national intelligence. It's in many ways wide swaths of our law enforcement, intelligence, and national security community when we face what is certainly a heightened threat environment as a result of everything